talk a little bit about that committee. That committee had community members, it had teachers on there, and for the first time in Argyle history, we had students on this committee. And so that was a very, very powerful piece to listen to the voice of the learner. Those kids are our very own students who are our buildings every day, to be able to hear their voice and their experiences in those places. And so we had students involved. This committee met formally 6 times for 2 hours each segment throughout October to December. But the amount of time they had to commit to what they had to study was much more than 2 hours over 6 sessions. So they had demography reports, they had capacity reports, they had the facilities reports, they had the financial advisor reports, they had a lot of data to scour over. And what was really interesting about this group is they got all the way to meeting 6, which was in December, and they had been all the way through everything. They were on the very last night of really building the bond project to propose the recommendation to the board, and we hit them with some new information. And that was a Wednesday, and we had received this information on Monday. And what had happened is they had already made their decisions. They were really working on what their recommendation was going to be, and we received word from the town of Flower Mound that there was a new application for housing development on the 250 acres right here to the south of Canyon Falls. We are going to try to figure out a way to purchase some of that land ourselves. Found out that that's the land that was in the lawsuit over the warehouses, and a housing development is what it was being zoned for, and so now there's a development on the docket, and that's, I think it's law Esconcia, something like that, but we know there's about 700 to 750 homes and 38 acres of multifamily homes that's on the application. So we had to get our demographer within that 2-day time frame before the committee came back to run that. The other piece is the 1,200 homes in the ETJ portion of First Ranch. That came on the docket that wasn't on the original fall demographer report. So on that last meeting, when they came in, we had to give them that information to digest as they prepared to finish up what they wanted to recommend for projects. So they had a lot of things to go through and a lot of things to process, but they did a great job of doing that with a lot of data points. The difference in this committee, when we went into this committee, we told them, you've got a 10-year strategic growth plan the board adopted in January of 2023. And so they have to decide as a committee, do they want to continue doing short-term bonds, that's what Argyle AISD has historically done, or do they want to look at that in terms of a long-term bond, more aligned with the 10-year strategic growth plan. And so as it came through committee, over many, many discussions, they decided to go with a 10-year growth bond. With that 10-year growth bond, they had priorities. And when you think of priorities, you often think really just what do you need versus what do you want. That was not the exercise they had. When we talked about priorities with this committee, we talked about priorities in terms of what do we need in the next 2 years that are emergencies, code issues, safety issues, maybe places that we couldn't even be in the buildings. Well, fortunately, we don't have any of those emergencies because we have taken great care of our facilities in Argyle ISD. But we did have priority 2 projects, which are things that we will need in the next 5 years due to student growth, and then priority 3 projects that we would need in the next 10 years. So those priorities were given based on years of when we would need them, not because us ranking what we think we need. So that was how they actually prioritized those projects. They also had all the data, demographic data, and so I mentioned that just a moment ago, what they were given at meeting 6, but that's just a quick graph of the next 10 years. So as the video mentioned, we will be over 10,000 students at the end of this 10-year strategic growth plan, which is where this bond will get us. So that's where we are right now, just at 5,500 students, and where we will be in 10 years, just over 10,000 students. So when we started, one of the historical things we looked at within the bond committee is we looked at the last 2 bonds. So Argyle ISD community has faithfully approved bonds over the last several years. The last 2 bonds were approved by this community, and those were short-term bonds. When you look at 2017 and 2022 together, we're still within the 10-year time frame of even 2017. And those 2 bond programs together were over $433 million prior to inflationary costs coming out of COVID. The 2017 bond projects are all completed. There are a few things left in there. Our bond oversight committee just met and we're going over that line item list. The 22 bond, that had the elementary 4, which is Jay Russman. It will open in August. It also has the 22 bond elementary 5, which is on the docket to open in the 27-28 school year. It also has the middle school, which will be located at the 407 site, and that is slated to open in 2026-27. And it also has Proposition B was the stadium, and the Proposition C was the indoor activity center here at Canyon Falls. And so all of those projects should be breaking ground. We should have groundbreaking in June of this summer on those two projects. So all of that in 22 is going. It's either you're seeing buildings, you're seeing things that are vertical, or we're still working with our municipalities, because we do have a lot of municipalities to work with. But those are short-term bonds because those were 3 to 5 years. This committee is proposing a 10-year long-range bond, just over $511 million, getting us through the next 10 years. All of the escalation and interest that we would actualize over those 10 years is built into this. We had architects in the process with us, our financial advisors in the process with us, and so that total includes 0.5% a month of interest through the duration of all these projects, because we wanted to make sure we didn't get in a bind, that we come out on the other side and we don't have enough money in there for projects now that we've been through this. A perfect example, when Argyle West was built and opened in 2019, that campus was built for about $225 a square foot. That same footprint of campus is Jane Russman Elementary, that's over $400 a square foot. So that's what we're seeing in terms of inflation and what's really jumped for districts that are passing bonds after the 22 timeframe. So you'll see 3 propositions in the video mentioned on the ballot. You'll have a Proposition A, a Proposition B, and a C. The law changed after 2017. Back at that point, you could have everything you want on one proposition. That changed, and so now you have to separate anything that's athletic related standalone in its own proposition, and one-to-one technology, which is one-to-one student devices, in its own proposition. Proposition A is the bulk of our bond, and that's all of our learning spaces, accommodating growth, renovations, capital improvements, those kinds of things. So middle school 2 would be in this bond, Proposition A, serving grades 6 through 8. So like I mentioned, middle school 1 will be over on the 407 site. The 377 campus will convert to a high school. We will need middle school 2 by the 28-29 school year based on our demographer numbers right now. This bond also has elementary 6 in it. So you see 4 opening in August. 5 is in 22's bond. We need that in 27-28. This elementary 6 would come online around the 2030 school year, depending on if we continue our 8 to 9% growth rate. Those growth rates, we had been at 14. We're still holding true with 8 to 9 right now. It could obviously pick back up if the interest rates go down, things like that. You know how that works. And so that right now we're looking at about 2030. We do not expect it to be any later. We could expect it to be sooner. So I mentioned earlier the students being in the bond committee, and I think this is the piece that really resonated with us as educators, I know, when we have those students in there, because a lot of times, I mean, that's very overwhelming. Students are in there and sitting at tables with adults, and if you ask any of the students that serve, they'll tell you they were sitting with very smart people, and they were, and so they weren't intimidated by that. They were able to use their voice, and it became very, very powerful. So when I talk about increased capacity at Argyle High School, this campus was always designed to have a third phase to it, and the third phase would connect the 2 academic wings that are currently here. That third phase would expand additional seats, obviously. Well, what the students were talking about, this campus currently has a capacity of 2,100. We have about 1,550 students in it. But what's happening is they have one circulation point, and so when the bell rings or when they're all trying to go to class, they're all coming to the same area. And so it's overwhelming, it's crowded, they don't like the feeling of that, it's just too many people. And they expressed that over and over, and so the committee decided, you know what, we need to get that third phase in there sooner than later. We can't wait more than 10 years to put phase 3 at Canyon Falls if 1,550 students already feel congested. We need to open that flow up, get that third phase in there, and open up that capacity so that we'll have that full circle. So as they talked through that, they added that project. The second piece, the increased capacity at Argyle Middle School, that originally was not, that was back and forth at the recommendation of the committee. They wanted to do it, and they kind of backed off of it. And so when the recommendation went to the Board of Trustees, they held a public workshop and kind of talked through these projects before they made a final vote to call the bond. Well, this fourth bullet right here became important because When the school board passed the 10-year strategic growth plan, January of '23, part of that was to say that we were looking at two, somewhat similarly sized high schools at build out. If we don't have the increased capacity at Argyle Middle School in this bond, it's hard for them to hold true to that, and that's what they were trying to hold true to. So they wanted to go ahead and add that piece in there. Well, that increased capacity at the middle school is very similar to what the students here at the high school are feeling. So Argyle Middle School right now at 377, it's a capacity of 1,300 students, but that cafeteria is still built before the last phase was even added to that. So it's tight in that cafeteria. It used to be a cafetorium. Coach Rogers may talk about that in a minute because he's been here long enough. He remembers all the phases of the middle school. And so we've talked about that in several instances. But when you expand that cafeteria 377, then it will go into that Gym 2 space, and we'll need the space. We'll need that Gym 2 space. Well, then the competition gym needs to be redone with the auxiliary gym in order to give the appropriate gym space for a school that size. So all of that is part of that increased capacity in the middle school. And then there's some other capital improvements that Coach will talk about here in a moment. The land acquisition piece, we do not currently have any land banked. The 407 side is the only thing we own right now that doesn't have anything on it, and it's going to have something on it. So you know as well as anybody, the developers are coming in fast as well, and so we're in a great competition for land. We need about 13 acres for an elementary site. We need about 35 acres for a middle school site, and you need about 100 acres for a high school site. So finding land in this community in our 35 square miles is very challenging. And so our land money is in here to help us with that. The other thing is you're trying to find land that has utilities already to it. I mean, some of the land we've got does not even have, doesn't have the sewer and the water, and all of those are things we have to take into consideration. I've been asked some questions about, the cost associated with renovating and adding to Argyle Middle School, and then some districts that are adding brand new high schools right now. Well, you've got Denton High School that's rebuilding their high school. They're going to come in over $300 million for their bid on that campus. You've got Northwest High School that's building a new high school. It's going to be, I think we're getting just over $400 million. Eagle Mountain Saginaw has a building. They're building a new school right now. They actually bid that before COVID inflation hit, so they bid that one about $275 million. But all of those already had land for those. So for us to go find 100 acres to build a new high school, the only option right now is in the northwest corner of the district with no utilities. So those are some of the things that we're having to deal with, that some people think that it might be easier and more cost effective to build a brand new campus, but we don't have land for it. So we're trying to use the facilities we have and be as fiscally responsible as we can with those facilities, because the bones are good. We have great facilities, we just need to make room for capacity for students. And then the capital improvements piece, I'm going to have Ms. Stewart and Coach Rogers talk about that in just a moment.
All right, thank you. So, capital improvements for our aging facilities. Of course, what you're sitting in here right now is a rather fairly new facility, and we have a few of those. But we have some of our older facilities as well. If you've been to Hilltop Elementary, if you look at our 377 campus, that's currently middle school, and you look at our 6th grade center. All of those are the areas that we're talking about capital improvements, and we're just talking about major capital items that are needed to keep those buildings going for the foreseeable future, right? You want to use these as long as you can. So Hilltop, there's some things that are needed with the boiler there that serves as the whole campus. If you look and walk up to the exterior, look at concrete, the sidewalks, the retaining walls, all of those, there's been quite a bit of movement over the years. Some of those need some improvements and some reinforcements now to last for the future. At the 6th grade center, we did just have a renovation there, but that renovation was not for the entire facility, for everything for the future. Some of the things that still are missing at that facility are, if you look at the HVAC systems there at what used to be the old admin hallway, or now they call it the 200 hallway. A lot of those are aging out. There's some areas there in the gymnasium and the bathrooms that still need to be upgraded. The stage flooring. I believe there's some areas that weren't sprinkler, that weren't required by code, but the district would like to sprinkle all of that facility. And then if you move over to 377, there's quite a few areas there. There's some areas out exterior to improve parking flow. On the interior, Dr. Carpenter mentioned that there were some additions there along the way. Well, when those the latest additions were done, Some of the renovations interior, some of the flooring was redone, but some of that's still the original and is aging out. You see a lot of wear and tear on it. You still have HVAC systems there. You have ceilings. You have quite a bit at the stage area. So that has original lighting and rigging there for the sound system and lighting, and all of that is aging out at this point as well. So there's just a lot to do to maintain our aging facilities so that we can utilize them for the future. The rest at 377 is the athletic facilities, and I'm going to let Coach Rogers talk to you about that.
Don't give me the remote. Okay, the capital, I have two things to talk to you about. One, the capital improvements, and second, Prop B. I'll start with the capital improvements first. Obviously, things that we want to do to the baseball, softball complex, field house, and the stadium on 377. Some of those things we occupied in 2003, some we occupied in 2014. And those are pretty critical dates because in 2003, we moved in facility, we had 287 kids in high school, right? So if we're going to put kids back over in that building, and there's some obvious improvements that we made. We have a girls' field house in the south end, and obviously we have some locker rooms tagged in our indoor facility. So in regards to the 2003 complexes, it's got 3 big locker rooms. Some were made for women, some were made for males. But we'll need to expand those, new lockers in those, renovate the showers to make it more accommodating for larger teams when we move that back to a full service high school. Carpet wears out, turf wears out. The lifespan on that is about 8 to 10 years. And so in regards to the stadium, it's about ready to time out for the stadium again. And in regards to the 2014 install, first year use for baseball, softball, we're meeting the 10-year window there as well. As we move up to baseball and softball, Argyle AISD actually built that baseball field, baseball, softball, and I don't think they really had the vision is it was that close in proximity. So we have a foul ball issue. All right, so it was easy for us to build that facility and make it a turf facility, but we should have spread it further apart. So to counterbalance that, in addition to that, we're going to put awnings to kind of protect the patrons on baseball, softball, so you don't get the raining foul balls coming from the other field. There was a big storage room built on that existing concession stand. That was for dirt, it was for clay. There's magic dirt in it right now. And so we don't need that anymore. But we have some real needs for good, high quality restrooms for men's and women. So we obviously want to upgrade that. There's also some, our teams are getting bigger. And so we want to make our dugouts a little bit larger for that. And also get some field service equipment right there on the edge of the field. So all those things will be looked at in regards to baseball and softball. In reference to the cafetorium, obviously we have 3 gyms on that campus. The only logical solution is to expand the existing cafeteria kitchen area into that old gym over there. If you've been here long, you know that's what it's called. It's called the old gym. Okay, and build that into that area, and then you'll need another competition gym to make that a high-functioning 9 through 12 campus. Now, Prop B is the reason we have Prop B is we have a strategic growth committee that meets. They meet 6 times. Okay, they want 2 9 through 12 campuses. Okay, all those things come into play. Is what we're going to need is we're going to need baseball, softball complexes. We've been enduring the shuttle concept, right? We've been shuttling kids. We have 5 teams. We got buses running back and forth. We got kids driving their own cars. Not the best solution, but a solution, right? So when we go through 2 9 through 12 campuses, we'll eliminate that. We have baseball, softball down here. Some people say, well, why don't you share that like you do a stadium? It's not able to do that. It's a practice facility as well as a game facility. So we'll have baseball, softball complex, very similar to what's on 377. We didn't build locker rooms over here when we originally built the facility, so we'll need to tag on some baseball, softball, locker rooms, shower facilities, and concession areas, and batting cages to tag along that facility to match the 377 campus. Okay.
Thank you. And then Proposition C would be the new, the new technology devices for secondary students. So 2014-15, Argyle ISD adopted the one-to-one program for student technology. So we continue that program. Those are 7-year lifespan devices. We use Chromebooks for our students. The first 4 years, those devices are in the hands of our secondary students, and those are one-to-one. And then the final 3 years, we rotate those through our elementaries. So like a class set would go to grades 3 through 5. Students would use them when teachers needed to do any type of assessments, but they're not one-to-one where the students actually take them home or anything like that. And then pre-K through 2nd grade also has some, but they are just like a station, if you will. There might be 4 or 5 in each classroom. So that's how those devices work. That's how we do the rotation. And so this bond, Prop C, would have enough in there for the 12,500 devices needed for growth, to accommodate growth over the next 9 years. So that's how we get our $511 million, is through those 3 propositions that you will see separately on the ballot. And we're going to talk about the ballot in a little bit, because there's some language on there that we need to make sure you're aware of, and Ms. Stewart will talk about that. But she's going to go into another segment here and talk a little bit about the M&O side, which is maintenance operations, and the INS side, which is the bond side, so that we make sure that we're informing you of both sides of how school finance works.
All right, so Texas public school finance. So when it comes to public schools in Texas, there's really 2 buckets of money. Okay, we have what's called our M&O side, which is our day-to-day operating expenses, and these also align with your tax rates. Okay, there's 2 sets of tax rates on your bill. You only see it as 1, but it breaks down into 2, M&O and INS. So M&O keeps our buildings open, pays all of our salaries, pays utilities, supplies, fuel, things like that. What we're talking about tonight is our debt service fund, or our INS fund. That is another section of the tax rate. This is how districts build new buildings. They do major repairs, purchase land, any major additions, things like that. So usually during bond elections, you hear quite a bit out in the public, and there's usually a sentiment of, how come if they need help on the M&O side, why don't they just take that money instead of building buildings, take that money and go pay teachers, right? Well, by state law, you can't cross those over. We can't use the INS money, the money that we're asking you to authorize. That cannot be used to pay the salaries or the utilities or the day-to-day costs. So by law, those are separated. It's just an education piece that we want to try and get out there to help with the questions about the bond. Dr. Cooper mentioned a little bit about, in the video, narrating that, about fiscal responsibility. So just as you have a mortgage on your home, or many people do, if you bought a home recently, right, you've seen those interest rates come up. They're a little bit higher right now. You might have a 6 or 7% interest rate. You're probably watching the market going, when those rates come back down, like we think they're going to, you may go out and refinance, because you're going to look at what would that save you in interest, what would that save you in the long term on the cost that you're paying for that home. Well, districts do the same thing with all of their bonded debt. So for the past several years, we've had the opportunity to refund or refinance and pay off early some of those bonds, and we've saved about $17.5 million. It's a similar concept, and we're constantly looking at that and working with our financial advisors to make sure that we're making every savings opportunity that's out there for the district. We've also lowered the tax rate. It's gone down 37 cents in the last 6 years. That's all on the M&O side. And the way state law for finance is written right now for public school finance, there's a compression in there where they require every district, and it's unique to each district. You have to lower that tax rate some. So for us, it's been 37 cents. The INS side is at 50 cents. We also want to know, what can we do as a district to help give any information possible to all of our taxpayers? So we looked around and found the state comptroller's program. It's called the Transparency Star program. They have a bunch of requirements that you have to go through of things that are required on your website. There's quite a few. They like 5-year trends. They like charts and graphs. They like raw data that you can download and look at yourself, and all kinds of information that's required. So we went through the process and made sure that our website had every bit of that information on that, and we were awarded for traditional finances, and then we went through the same processes for our debt, and then the debt transparency star, so that we can provide any information the taxpayer may want on our finances are found on our website. You just go to the district website, go to departments, finance, and it's all listed there. So the tax rate is unchanged. We're talking about the INS tax rate in this instance, right? I mentioned just a minute ago that it's 50 cents. We're going to fund this bond with that 50 cents, and it will not go beyond 50 cents. And people look at you and go, how are you going to fund $500 million, $11 million with the current tax rate? Well, if you look around, you see all the growth in the area, right? You see the new homes, the new businesses, everything's coming into our district. So to give you just a little bit of information on that, back around 16, 17 timeframe, we had 1.5 billion in taxable value in this district. As of this year, we have over 5 billion of taxable value in this district. So it's significant growth, and it's continuing to grow. That growth is what gives us the ability to bond for new debt. So that is how we're going to maintain the tax rate at 50 cents and continue to be able to fund schools as we go and build new buildings. But when you go to the ballot, the state of Texas says that every proposition has to say, this is a property tax increase. It doesn't matter whether you're projecting that tax rate to go up, down, or stay the same. The ballot must say it's a property tax increase. So that's just an information and educational piece that we need to get out to everybody. Because you're going to hear, we're telling you it's going to remain unchanged, but then you're going to go to the ballot, and you're going to read that and think, well, they just lied to me, right? By law, we can't change this. Has to be there, just an educational piece. In the state size, anytime you take on a new debt, they think that's new taxes, a new tax rate. So that's just something that we can't change, that we need to make you aware of.
Can I talk a little bit about authorization?
Yes, thank you for that part. So, authorization versus issue on bonds. So what is being asked right now is for you to consider an authorization of bonds. The full authorization at one time, $500 million. Anytime you go and vote on any type of bond issue, we're talking about authorization. So voters authorize you to issue debt. We don't take all of that debt on at once. You take the debt on as you issue the bonds. And we issue the bonds in increments, okay? It's as our bonding capacity is made available with that growth and as the projects are needed. So for instance, in 2017 bond and in the 2022 bond, the district has 3 issuances of debt. So the authorization was made possible by the one-time vote, but then those issuances came along the way, and so the debt only comes on as we issue it. And that's only when we have bonding capacity in order to do so. So just a difference again, authorization and issuance of bonds.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so early voting does start a week from Monday, so the 22nd to the 30th will be early voting. Obviously, Election Day is May 4th. We have early voting sites listed here. They're also on our website. The town of Argyle is not hosting an election this spring, so they are not a polling location, but these are your early voting locations for Argyle ISD. And again, those are located, you've got a QR code there. Our website has all of this information. You can find it at the location as well. The handout you received today is a front and back version of this presentation. It has pretty much every bit of information that you just saw in the presentation on a handout. There's also a QR code if you want to save it as a PDF or you want that to access that on your phone. And then again, we just have some QR codes back to the website and our FAQ page. So we're building that FAQ page as we go. We have several great questions coming in on Ask Argyle, Just Ask Argyle feature on our website, and as those are coming in, we're trying to get those turned around as time permits, and we're adding a lot of those to the FAQ depending on where they fall in questions related to the bonds. So just wanted to make sure you have that information. So you have the video, you have a handout, and you have this presentation and a full website. So we hope that that provides you a lot of information that you may need to make an informed decision, whatever that decision may be. And that really kind of closes out the presentation portion. And